Welcome back to Detections Podcast on Lockdown Quarantine with your hosts, XL Detrades and...
Understudy 77.
Oh, God. Is it over yet?
No, I think we're in for the long haul, man. I think we're in it for the long haul.
This extrovert sees humans and gets the sad puppy dog eyes and the pet store look.
Yeah, my kid does, too. This introvert misses human contact, though, I'm not going to lie. Or pants. Probably pants. I think occasionally I miss getting up and getting dressed.
There's something to that, right? I mean, meaning you got something to do for the day, you can get focused.
Oh, no, I have plenty to do for the day. This week specifically, I have had plenty to do all day. I have done nothing but meetings upon meetings upon meetings for the entire week. Hence optional, because you can only see me from the waist up.
Yeah, and at least put on, shorts or something, so if you forget to turn off your camera when you need to go to the bathroom, it's not boxers or whitey tighties.
I have pajama pants.
Oh, man.
I like my pajama pants.
So what else has been going on?
Animal Crossing. I just got an Iron Man helmet to go with the rest of my Iron Man suit.
So now you can walk around like Iron Man.
Yes, I can.
Does it play like a MIDI version of the song?
No. But I can walk around like Iron Man.
Nice.
No, it's been work and family and Animal Crossing. Like, that is my life now. And I'm so wonderfully have forgotten to mute my phone. Both of them, as a matter of fact, so I should probably fix that.
Yeah. Well, it looks like soon I will have an official job offer. So I will no longer be an unemployed podcaster.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And that means, too, that even despite everything that's going on, there's still hope. As long as people just don't give up. And you're still turning off your phone. So when you get back...
I'm here.
Yeah, I don't have any other announcements. Like, we kind of covered everything. We did have the Jay on the last episode, which was a fun episode, getting him on.
It was a fun episode, mainly because I think I played Animal Crossing through most of it. No, I'm just kidding. I don't do that. I am the utmost professional most of the time. Sometimes.
At least we got to talk about Veronica Mars, which made me happy.
Okay, occasionally. But yes, I do like Veronica Mars. You know what else we should talk about? Doctor Who.
So have you watched this show called Community?
Yeah, I love Community.
You watched far enough to see, what was it?
I've watched all of Community.
Inspector Time Space, is that what his name is?
But so here's the thing.
Doctor Who.
We're gonna hit a point eventually where, like, I stop talking to you about any other show but Doctor Who. Until you watch Doctor Who.
But see, now I'm getting it during one of my eating TV shows and comedy respite is I'm getting the Doctor Who influence without actually calling it Doctor Who in Community.
Yeah, but it's an influence. It's still not the real deal. You still need to watch the real deal. All right. So anyway,
news. You got some news for us, don't you?
Well, before we do that, let's set the bar, right? So just so everybody knows, tonight of all the episodes, we will have news, we will have a detection, but the topic is not necessarily directly related to InfoSec. So I'm just letting people know in case you want to turn it off right now. We are in a time of a global pandemic where a lot of people are stuck at home and a lot of people don't have something to do. We've said this more than once on this program. We recommend that anybody with something to say, and everybody has something to say, should podcast, Twitch stream, whatever, any of that. So tonight we're going to peel back the metaphorical curtain, because I don't have curtains in my office. I do have blinds, and talk about, like, the gear that we use, the programs that we use, basically how we put together this podcast. In case you're looking to kind of jump into it yourselves, maybe we can make it a little bit easier. because, we went through a little bit of the trial and error stuff and did a whole bunch of research into what gear we wanted and what programs we wanted to use and how we wanted to do all this stuff. So like, we're going to pull back that curtain. So if that's not something that interests you, by all means, cut out after the news. If you hate the news, cut out now. See you later. See you next week. I just wanted to set the record straight for everybody on what to expect this time.
Yes, but it'll still be interesting because, like Understood was saying, everyone's got something to share. And now when you've got nothing else to do, is a good time to try something new. Try broadcasting, podcasting, see if it's something you enjoy.
Absolutely. I do have some news. And I will say this, hacks and attacks are way the hell up right now, which is something realistically we can kind of expect in a global pandemic. But before I even talk about any of that, I'm going to talk about this other thing that I read that's kind of cool. 3D printed fingerprints have been used to unlock devices that have fingerprint sensors. Also, I apologize. Like 2 days ago, I bit my tongue bad. And if I slur or like I sound funny or anything, it's not because I'm drunk, which I could be, but I'm not because I don't drink. It's because I bit my tongue and it's still a little bit uncomfortable. So I do apologize for that. Anyway, 3D printed fingerprints can unlock a device with 80% success rate. It's not particularly easy to do. So like when you really break it down, like there's a lot of steps. You have to get the fingerprint. You have to get it from a person. You have to use a sensor. You have to lift a fingerprint off of an object. Then you have to create a mold with a 3D printer, and then you have to cast that mold onto like silicone or fabric glue. So it's not easy, but it is possible. They compromise the iPhone 8, a Samsung S10, a Samsung Note 9, a Huawei P30 Lite, a MacBook Pro 2018, an iPad 5th generation, a Samsung Note 9, an Honor 7X, and an all-case padlock. And there were a couple things like the Samsung A70 that didn't work. As well as they would have wanted to. But really kind of cool and interesting thing, they carried out the whole project with a budget constraint of $2,000, and it took several months. So they're not saying that this is going to be something that you're going to see a lot. They are just kind of proving that it's possible. And I thought it was really cool to talk about.
Did the article also play the Mission Impossible theme when it loaded up?
It did. Man, there's always that part of you that like would love to have a soundtrack or something like that for things. But then until you realize like, oh, I hit refresh and oh, it's that again. Oh my God, I'm so sick of this song.
Unlike what I've heard from Animal Crossing when I've been Discord chatting with friends that are playing it, it's a pretty soothing, repeating soundtrack.
It is, but there's also like 90 different KK Slider songs you can get. And they vary in general quality, in my opinion, but you can change them. Fun fact, in 2 rooms of my Animal Crossing house, I have like a hi-fi stereo and I have like a little portable stereo. The audio quality is different between the rooms.
Damn.
On the different stereos. And that's one of those little tiny features that I was like, I didn't think about it at first. And I was like, why is this? Because I was playing the same song in both rooms. I'm like, this doesn't sound all that good. Then I went to the other room. I'm like, oh my God. Like the sound changes based on what stereo you use. That's crazy.
That is very crazy.
Anyway, what do you got?
I'm trying to find because I wanted to get the exact quotes. Here we go. So I found an interesting one that there's malware out there from what group was it? I don't remember. But they're impersonating security researchers. They're impersonating the Vitaly Kremez and Malware Hunter team in their note when they infect a system.
That's amusing,
right?
I wonder if it makes people think that it's like a research exercise or something, and it basically would turn down the blue team's guard. Because what happens when a blue team finds out it's a pen test? Oh, it's just a pen test. We don't really got to worry about this. We'll pick it up in the morning.
Fuck those guys. Yeah, and they even use Vitaly's Twitter handle and Malware Hunter team's Twitter to say if you have any issues with what we're doing, contact us here.
Yeah, so it's literally a red herring situation so that you think, it's a pen tester, we'll pick it up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. That's actually kind of clever, really. Like, pretty freaking clever.
Yeah. I can't quickly find the group that they're attributing to doing it, but yeah. So impersonating security researchers. So once you get well known, it seems like you're not out of the line of fire of being spoofed yourself for malicious malware use.
It's a good thing nobody knows who we are. So here's an interesting string. So personal data of 1.41 million US doctors has been sold on a hacking forum. Does not contain email address. It's a website. So basically it's a database that exists on a website to find doctors. So it's an online service that lets people search for healthcare professionals, book appointments, and consult with doctors. They stole millions of doctor records because doctors can register themselves. They did not get email addresses, but they did get patients' photos, photos and medical records were not among the data. However, they did get full names, genders, names of hospitals, organizations where they work, location, mailing address, practice address, country, phone numbers, license number, and more. But it does not contain email address. And this article is really interesting to me because it says, the good news is that this trove of data does not contain email addresses, which means doctors are safe from phishing. All right, let's be real for a second. If you have that much data, it's not a real hard leap to toss together a couple like common email strings and shoot out some emails, and you're probably going to land. Not entirely uncommon that will happen. But one of the reasons why this becomes really interesting is because, especially when we talk about the coronavirus stuff, there's another article that coronavirus scientists and doctors by proxy, actually. Well, hold on. Before I go into that, like one of the things that's dangerous about all this data being stolen is you have a lot of data about doctors now. So if you want to phish patients in specific areas, that becomes a lot easier too, because you can actually seem like a doctor. Like they got license numbers and all this other, and addresses and stuff, right? So like they can really start hitting the mark with like good phishing, seeming like they're doctors, trying to give you information about coronavirus.
And with people a little on the freaked out side right now relating to coronavirus, they're going to be a little less. Crap! I just lost the word. But they're going to think logically less through those kinds of emails.
People are more emotional right now, which is why the coronavirus stuff works. But another piece of this that comes from the same healthcare side is that coronavirus scientists have been big targets for foreign cyber espionage. There's an FBI report that nation-state hackers are running cyber espionage against medical research organizations in the U.S. that are studying coronavirus. So they've seen a lot of reconnaissance activity and intrusions, especially for people who have publicly identified themselves as working on COVID-19 related research. Really interesting. Like there's a lot there, right? Like you're looking at like, you know, if you could steal some of the vaccine data or deal serious damage in that, like you could, there's a big bank in that right now. So there's a whole bunch of things kind of going on around this. None of it's new. Anytime we have something like this, this is what happens, right? Crimes of opportunity.
Yeah. And now there's definitely a lot of opportunity.
Exactly. And back to you.
So I've got a couple that I'm going to do here that string together as the businesses themselves are kind of related. The first one here is actually about NASA. I found an Ars Technica article where they were talking about NASA seeing an exponential jump in malware attacks since more people are working from home. And what I wanted to bring up that was interesting about this, despite the increase and all that, but their internal statistics that they were reporting shows that people are doubling the amount of malicious links that they're clicking at home versus being at work. Now, I mean, a place like NASA, I can assume that it's full of a lot of really smart people. And if that sort of location is having a trend of doubling.
Hold on. Let's talk about that for a second, because you're right. NASA is full of a bunch of really smart people. But let's just remember that they're smart in the thing that they're smart in. So like, I wonder if my wife will get mad at me for talking about this. Her grandpa is an ex-NASA physicist, so he designed rockets and rocket trajectories and stuff, right? My wife's grandma, or my grandma-in-law's line is that he was a brilliant physicist, but he couldn't figure out how to work the vacuum cleaner. And that's not just a dig. Like, really smart people tend to be really smart at the things that they know. Like, we know this stuff. Mm-hmm. We're not really smart people, but we know this stuff. Like, this is what we do. So, like, it's ingrained so much into us to, like, not click a link or not do this thing or whatever. But then you look at, like, finance people or physicists or, like, people who aren't really involved in the internet side of the world. They're really smart people, but they're not necessarily smart about this topic. And it's really, really important as we talk about this to kind of note that, like, being really smart doesn't mean that you're not susceptible to something you're unfamiliar with.
Agreed.
Because it's super common to be really, really good at one thing and really, really unfamiliar at another. You throw me like some particle physics shit and my head's going to blow up. I mean, you throw me almost anything but this kind of stuff and maybe like board games and some strategy and stuff, and my head's going to explode.
Yeah, totally agreed. And what I was going to get at is, I wonder if the trend is going to be similar to other high engineering, high theoretical sorts of fields.
Probably. They tend to be really susceptible.
Yeah.
Because a logical thinker tends to not really, look at the emotional side of things and look for the call to action and look for a lot of that stuff. So, like, honestly, like, engineers oftentimes tend to be really, really susceptible to this kind of stuff.
Meaning those people who are on the defense side of watching the networks while these people are working from home probably are extra busy, since there's a lot more stuff that's getting clicked on compared to when they're in the office. It's
probably safe to say that every InfoSec professional is extra busy right now. That would be my guess.
It's probably true. So the other one that I had that was related to it, related because it's Boeing, Lockheed Martin, SpaceX. They had one of their contracting companies that got hit with ransomware, and the company didn't pay in time. So the Doppelhammer group put some of the confidential documents in a publicly available website. That whole disclosure thing that we talked about at the beginning of the year, they're actually doing it. And then, these are some pretty big companies that are having things just thrown out on the internet.
Yeah. There's a pickup. Like, I got another one in that same vein. Mm-hmm. 10 terabytes of data from a ransomware attack on an energy giant, Portuguese electric company. Lost 10 terabytes. Nice. And it's demanding 1,580 Bitcoins, so about $10.9 million. And energy companies, like, having worked quite a few, or, a few IR cases with energy companies, they're a huge target and a real concern because they're critical infrastructure. And, like, critical infrastructure can't go down. So they've got files and screenshots from your network as proof of possession. So not only did they lock stuff out, they've got possession of data. And they're threatening to publish the launch. So, like, there's quite a bit in that archive of data.
Damn.
So that's another one.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. What I got here is completely unrelated to that, but it is related to the remote working and remote conversations, as it's malware leveraging Discord again. So the Anarchy Grabber malware, which up to this point has been pretty easily caught from what they're saying by most antiviruses, has updated their detection evasion. And now they inject code into the index.js file of the Discord client, which apparently isn't scanned, and Discord doesn't do an integrity check on that file.
Dude, so what companies do well in a pandemic like this, where everybody's locked at home?
Slack.
What sectors? I should say what sectors do well.
Remote communication and food delivery.
remote communication, food delivery, media, and telecommunications. So what companies become huge targets? Remote communications, media, telecommunications, and food delivery.
Yep.
And what's really interesting, they also, like, one of the things that tends to happen is they get put through a very serious lens as well. This actually plays a lot with Zoom, and I'm sure most people have heard a whole bunch of Zoom stuff. Hell, I've talked to people now who are like, I will never use Zoom. Like, Zoom is the worst thing in the world because somebody released a 0-day that required local access. They're like, this is unacceptable. I give Zoom credit. Their security team is doing the right thing. They're under a lot of fire for a lot of things, but their security team is doing the right thing. They're working on it. They're trying to do the best they can. But like, when you get double your user base pretty quickly, it gets rough. So in Zoom news, on that note, 500,000 Zoom accounts have been found being sold on a hacker forum. 530,000 Zoom account credentials are being sold on the dark web. And like right before that, they were sharing verified login details of verified Zoom accounts for free. Get those credentials to Zoom Bomb, which occurs when a meeting is disrupted or crashed, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I'm trying to see specifically where they got them. Means if you're using the same password that was compromised years ago, your Zoom account can be broken into. Some of the accounts belong to notable institutes, including like University in Vermont, Colorado, Dartmouth, Florida, Lafayette, companies like Chase, Citibank, which makes it a little bit more serious for Zoom bombing. Somebody purchased them for like at a price of 0.0020 each, totaling $10.60 for all those accounts. Email addresses, passwords, links of personal meetings, and host keys. It looks like it was a credential stuffing attack. And then you look at a government minister's Zoom webinar was hijacked or Zoom bombed to display porn. So he got on to do a impacts of COVID-19 and educate people on COVID-19 and vulnerable and at-risk members of society. And when the journalists and everybody showed up, they got porn instead of the information that they thought they were going to get. And the government organization had to make a tweet apologizing for the meeting being hijacked. This is another example of technology-assisted assault. We've reconvened the meeting to a more private setting. So, like, look, Zoom is taking a lot of crap right now. Some of it fair, some of it not fair, I think, personally. Like, there's another post, alleged Zoom 0 days for Windows and Mac OS for sale. They want $500,000 for them. So the Windows one is, they're saying that it's a remote code execution. The Mac one, they think you need physical access. However, it looks like Zoom is saying that they don't actually see anything. So they don't believe that it's actually a problem because no proof has been provided. But like, just read things fully, form your own opinions on the Zoom thing, because there's a lot going on with Zoom right now, and they're going to take a lot of hate because they're probably the most popular video chat software in the world right now. I'm not saying I'm behind them or against them, just in general, look into it a little bit because there's more to that story than there seems. And I think in some senses, they've taken a bit of an unfair stick. But also pay attention to the news if you use it, because, you know, if your creds get compromised or any of that stuff, like, you want to be on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else you got?
So the last one that I have for us today, I wanted to share because it was a pretty good breakdown, and it was related to BGP hijacking. I don't know if all of our listeners are completely familiar with how it works, but this is a pretty good technical breakdown. But another interesting thing about this one, as this one happened fairly recently at the beginning of April, is it was almost 4,300 IP addresses. IP address, what was it? It exact number. 4569 prefixes that were affected by this, and 4255 of them belong to Amazon, and 85 of them belong to Akamai. Most of the BGP hijacking that has occurred up to this point hasn't really affected services, but this one actually affected services. So definitely, if you're interested, want to know more, check the link on this, and they do a pretty good breakdown of everything that was affected and how it happened.
Nice. You got any more?
No, that was it for me.
Well, I got one more. And this is a really interesting one to me, just because like visibility on this is always pretty bad from a Defender perspective. Chrome extensions. So Google just removed 49 Chrome extensions caught stealing crypto wallet keys. They were mimicking cryptocurrency wallet apps, and they were stealing private keys and phrases so that they could steal your crypto wallet. So those are gone, but it's a cool article, and it highlights something that's kind of worth talking about. Like, one thing that, many organizations are going to have application tracking and whitelisted, blacklisted applications, things like that. But many organizations are not going to have a high level of visibility, even with enhanced like EDR technologies, into Chrome extensions that are running. So like, you might see something weird happening from Chrome, but that could be related to a extension, and you might not be able to track down what extension that is. So like, paying attention to extensions or trying to lock them down from a Google admin perspective is not a bad idea. If people are using Google, and you can do that within your organization, because like, extensions, in my personal experience, and if somebody has a good way to do this, please tell me, have been notoriously difficult to track down and get any real visibility into in a logical way.
Yeah, even I've encountered that. The only time we've been able to track down extensions is when it's been ones that beacon out or heartbeat back to their main servers that catch up in our C2 beaconing alerts. Like Evernote is a pretty big violator of that.
Yeah, but even when you get a beaconing alert, can you trace it back to the specific extension?
Not specifically, but it's very much like, it's going to Evernote. Oh, look, Evernote's installed on their computer. We can therefore, that's what I'm saying. I agree that it's difficult, but of the ones we've been able to do, it's been inferred because of other factors.
Sure. I feel like it gets dangerous when you don't, like, it's going to something that you don't know.
Yeah.
And you don't have a good way to be like, it's this Chrome extension. You can say it's this host. You can say Chrome made the call.
Yep.
But you can't necessarily know that it's even a Chrome extension, let alone what Chrome extension did it.
Yeah.
And that's where like visibility in Chrome extensions gets really interesting, because like they're within that browser, and you don't often get a lot there.
Yeah, because they don't register the same as programs or services on the host where almost all the logs are coming from.
Exactly. They don't have their own processes. Yep. They don't do any of that stuff because they all function within Chrome.
Yep.
So you'll get process equals Chrome, and you won't get details about the extension itself.
Yeah.
Cool problem. If anybody has a solution to it, I'd love to know. So like, feel free to tag me and let me know, because I'd love to read anything or see anything that anybody's done to help solve that problem.
Or tag the podcast, so then the listeners and the followers can see the information also.
True that. Although I check that one less. But speaking of podcasts, how do we make one?
That was a good question, because I had no idea what to do when we first started.
Yeah, that I remember.
I was the one that was just like most people who thought about it is, all right, Google, Bing, search engine of choice, how to make a podcast. And then just start scrolling through articles and see what other people are saying.
Do you see what I have to work with? Bing is his search engine of choice. Seriously.
I'm just trying to be an equal opportunity search engine person here. Oh, I should have mentioned then DuckDuckGo. I do know some people that use DuckDuckGo on a regular basis.
DuckDuckGo is acceptable, but Bing? Anyway, for another time. So, I mean, ultimately, and that's kind of what we did. So for anybody unaware, and I'm not going to give away too many details, prior to starting this, I had 6 years of like online broadcasting in a live setting. if you look, you could find it, but I'm not going to give it away. But I guarantee if you look, you'll find it because it's not really that far extrapolated from this.
And I just had a lifetime of talking out of my ass to a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I mean, me pretty much too. I just did it in an online recorded setting for a while of that. So we kind of started down this road where we said, hey, let's make a podcast. And then we said, okay, how do we make that podcast? And ultimately to us, like what I will tell you that I figured out about this now that we've simplified it a little bit is it cuts down kind of into like three unique, or I'm not going to say a number. I'm just going to talk about the unique concepts, because if I say a number, then it's going to be more than what I said or less. You have the gear that you use to do the recording, like your hardware. That's one part of it. That's important. Like the hardware and the space. I'm going to consider all the physical stuff to be one thing. Then you have like the service that you use to record said podcast. So like what records your podcast and what does that look like? Then you have what you use to mix said podcast. You could probably tie that in with recording if you wanted to. That way I can keep my word on three.
But you can break it out because bigger podcasts than us, that those are two completely separate functions.
I mean, they're completely separate functions for us too. And then we just do it in a lazy automated fashion. And then you have where you host the podcast. So like, where do you host the podcast and like, how do you get it to all these different podcast providers and what does that look like? And then finally, not really directly related to the podcast, but like websites and Twitters and all that. Everybody I'm sure is
the marketing
with Twitter, but like, the website, which we've been through more than one iteration of said website to our newest one recently. So we could break this down like piece by piece. Do you want to start with like the hardware and physical stuff?
I can. And a lot of that for me was just asking other people what they're using. So like what microphones they were using, if anything worked better on different operating systems like Mac OS or Windows. And some of it even came into kind of like a cyclical relationship of what were we going to record, what equipment worked with that best. I ended up settling on, not just from your recommendation, but from independent research too, the Blue Yeti microphone, especially for being the first timer into this and not having any sort of like boom setup, small desk space, like living in an apartment by myself, I had much more limited space to work with.
So most of my stuff comes from, so before that 6 years of broadcast experience, I had a music studio in my basement where my band used to record stuff. So I developed a particular love of certain microphones and certain things during that time. So when I was doing music, I had a Blue Spark XLR microphone and like a computer input. Why can't I remember the name of the thing right now? Like there's a common industry term for it that just escapes my mind because I haven't played music in such a long time. Then I wanted to simplify when I started doing podcast stuff. So I had a Yeti for a little while actually, but I wasn't in love with my Yeti. So I found out that Blue made a Spark microphone, very exactly the same as the Spark microphone that I used to use, but it was USB. So I bought that. And for 6 years, I used that. It was great. I loved it. It was awesome. But we were doing stuff through like Hangouts on Air. When we started doing this podcast, as everyone I'm sure has heard Frank in the background, I am now, a foot from my server rack, which has fans and things that make noise. So I needed some way to solve that problem. Preferably a way to solve that problem that did not involve a lot of intensive editing for my part, because I don't want to do that. So I ended up settling on the Blue Yeti X as my new microphone, primarily because it's got software onboard controls that include a noise gate, expanders, and a bunch of other stuff so that I can tune the audio setting. So like I hear myself right now direct line like through the mic because I'm plugged into the mic, but the actual output is different than what I'm hearing right now because it's putting it through some processing as it records and once it goes into the computer, including cutting out the background noise, which is really useful for me to have. So if you're in an area with high background noise, I strongly suggest the Yeti X because of that software functionality.
Or you can test out like what I did. I end up getting this reflection filter, which would explain why partway through up to this point, you hear it sounded like more I was in an echo room or in a big room before. Where versus now, definitely the recordings sound a little bit tighter, a little bit smaller, not as much of that background echo.
Oh yeah, that still would not have cut down my background noise,
Yes.
but that will cut down background echo.
Yes.
So my old room, I used to have strategically placed foam panels in my music studio that I used to do a podcast, or I used to do the video podcast in, which basically allowed for minimal echo, but it stopped multiple bounce back, meaning it stopped reverberating echo, but it didn't stop all echo. Because if you stop all echo, and this is something worth knowing actually, if you stop all echo, audio sounds unrealistic. People don't like to hear things with absolutely no echo. It makes it sound completely and totally unrealistic because it's not real.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing too, since we're in the whole mic hardware section, is the headphones or the that sort of things that we use. We learned here that when people just use the built-in microphone and speaker on their laptop or phone, that you can get echo in the recording that you don't necessarily hear upon first recording.
Yeah. And that will all come down to the software that you use. Many pieces of software like Skype and Google Hangouts and things of that nature have some built-in protections, including Discord has built-in protections to keep it so that that doesn't happen. When we get into the software suite that we're using and why we're using it, we'll explain. It's a little bit more on the professional multi-channel audio side, but online. So it doesn't really have any of that built-in protection. So you need to wear headphones.
Yeah. And of those headphones, I definitely recommend over the ear over anything else.
100%.
And have it plugged, like you were saying, directly inline in the microphone itself. So that way you can hear what you sound like, what the guests and other people on the recording sound like. And studio quality ones make a huge difference because then you're able to hear any background noise that may be coming in. So when you have to do the post-recording processing, you're aware of some spots beforehand.
Yes. And depending on your appetite for a good pair of headphones, many of them have multi-purpose. So I use a set of Shure SRH 1540s. I love these headphones. They are my favorite headphones of all time. But also, like when I'm done recording, I unplug them from here and I plug them into a shit Valhalla 2 tube amplifier for like listening to music and stuff because I'm crazy with like music and audiophile-y stuff. So like you don't necessarily need a pair of headphones like these. Literally, if you look for like studio monitors for under $100, you can find some really good headphones that'll give you a pretty even noise rate and you'll be able to know like too much bass, too much not. Another reason why I like the Yeti X so much is because I can kind of tune that stuff on the fly and I can drop my bass down or I can pick up my mids or whatever without having to do that in a post-production perspective.
Yeah, and I use the Soul Republic over the ears. I actually got a special one that was specially tuned for certain music recording. But yeah, definitely, like you were saying, the anything that's set up even for under $100, but anything set up for a studio will help a lot.
Yep.
So you were talking about software.
Yeah, so then we get into the software suite. And this is actually probably the most difficult one of all of it because there's a whole bunch of things, services, free things that you can use, all that. Honestly, if you're recording by yourself and you're not doing an online kind of thing, you can totally get away with using QuickTime and just recording yourself or GarageBand or whatever you want to use to record, right?
Yeah, for those who use the Apple computers, the GarageBand, iMovie, all the like default programs that come with Apple computers work pretty good for most people that are not in a professional standpoint for doing this and any other sort of like broadcasting.
If you want to do professionally stuff, you can get Reaper, which is another audio processing thing, primarily for music. That's like Logic Pro, maybe, which is the expensive one. I can't remember the name of it. But Reaper is completely free and awesome if you want to go into like the real professional audio editing side of things. But honestly, like for the purposes of doing something like this, your GarageBands and your QuickTimes are going to realistically be fine. And with QuickTime, you can do video or not video, whatever the case may be. One other note on hardware. One, I suggest you invest in a pop filter. They help a lot. It's basically just a little foam pad that sits in front of your mic so that the pop, 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 pop don't sound quite as bad or as horrible. Like that probably sounded pretty bad because I was making the sound, not just the P sound. But if I remove it, it'll sound a lot worse and it'll actually clip on the edge of my microphone. I have one that like attaches to my mic. It doesn't attach to my boom stand. I also hang my mic upside down and use a boom stand. I use a Rode boom stand, which I really like. That way I can swivel my mic out of the way when I'm done, and it's really easy and nice. Anyway, software. So all these services that exist, the Skypes and stuff, what we ended up settling on, we settled on for a very specific need. One of the things that we wanted when we recorded, because when you look back to certain episodes, especially episodes like the episode with Recon InfoSec, we didn't catch it during recording. We didn't even catch it till after upload when somebody told us. But there was a persistent echo that existed on the recording. And it was because somebody wasn't wearing headphones and we were getting feedback. So we use a service called Cast, which is audio only. But it takes up to 4 people and it does multi-channel audio. And that was really important to us because if we needed to edit or clip anything out or make any adjustments, we can. Yep. Even after the fact, like it saves all this stuff in our Cast account, which I think we pay like $12 a month for or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
So it saves all this stuff in our Cast account. And I can go in, I can get all the individual channels. I can download the individual channels if I want, but I can also go in right from the online interface into the editor and I can clip out audio sections and I can rearrange audio sections and I can add stuff if I need to. So like we wanted to have that ability to fix issues post-production if we had to by using multi-channel audio so that we could fix the issues on only the audio track that had the issue.
Yeah, and the other services that we looked in had a lot of similar features with online editing and things like that, but it was the multi-channel that was the decider for us. Because some of the other ones, even though you could have guests, it still recorded everyone on the same channel, which when you start digging in more into the audio stuff, being able to have the multi-channels for recording, like Understudy was saying, will end up saving lots of headache ahead of time, having them separated out before you combine them together.
Yeah, because imagine you do an episode where you do have some persistent echo and your end result is a single channel audio stream. You can't fix that echo. It's not happening. Yeah. On multi-channel, you can.
In a lot of ways, if you've done any sort of like mastering or recording of music with music software, a lot of that same stuff is very similar. You just don't have to deal with any of the instrument inputs, right? You're just dealing with the voices, so it's a lot simpler to work with. But a lot of the principles still work the same.
I used to have an 8-channel input that did multi-track. So when we would do a rehearsal or we would play as a band, if we were practicing and wanted to record a track, I could record on separate tracks. The other benefit of that is, say I'm coming in way louder than Exiled right now. Well, I can just go in and bump up his volume before I even mix it down. That way we're closer to the same general volume. So it's been a pretty cool piece of software. A couple little weird things here or there, to be honest. But for the most part, it's been a really cool piece of software for us, and it's worked well.
The flexibility has been the huge thing. So even when we're traveling, it's, we can just hop on a website and do the recording and still do a podcast. Where if we had set up more than a recording studio, we'd have to have a system that was set up to record brought with us and have like a travel sound booth in a way.
Exactly. And then the after effect. Again, like you can do the GarageBand or Reaper or any of those.
Audacity, LMS.
Yeah. So I actually use a piece of software called Auphonic. And I don't know that you've ever actually been part of this piece of the process, Exiled.
I haven't.
Essentially, I just go in, I upload my file, I add the intro and outro now that we have those because it's part of it. I can build in metadata and stuff, but I don't. And then I go down to the audio algorithms. I use the adaptive leveler. I use the loudness normalization. I use the filtering, and I use the noise and hum reduction. And then I set my loudness target at like 16 LUFS, which is for podcasts and mobile. And it's got a whole bunch of different stuff, but I set it for podcasts and mobile. And then I hit start production, and you get 2 free hours of this a month. And then like you can pay for extra hours as you go. I think this is really maybe $10 a month or something like this for us for how much how long our episodes are and how many episodes we do. But basically in about 10 minutes, it spits out a thing where all the audio is at about the same level. It's filtered, noise and hum is reduced. Like, it's just really, really convenient. And it does a lot of that stuff for me in a way that I don't have to mix and master something, because I will tell you, in all the time I did music, I hate mixing and mastering, and I suck at it. So strong general recommendation on this piece of software if you want to be lazy and spend a couple bucks rather than spending your time. It works pretty well. I think, since we've started, our audio quality has gotten consistently better.
Yes.
One from, different microphones and making some hardware changes. The other one, honestly, it was a couple episodes in that I started using this software so that we could, get to a similar loudness across the whole podcast and kind of get everything set right. So we didn't have those bigger peaks and bigger valleys. So like we've kind of been building on this over the last 22 episodes, which is why it's worth chatting about.
Yes, and it's only going to get better as we continue to make changes to improve it.
And then comes the hosting provider, which is arguably probably the most important thing about a podcast.
Because that's how you get it out there to people.
Exactly. So we did some research, and there are hundreds of hosting providers.
And you can do it all yourself. You could self-host.
You totally can. Although self-hosting comes with its own kind of weird things.
A lot. So I did initial research on self-hosting because I was thinking about putting it all up in AWS, having this serverless website built, like big grand scheme, super complicated. And I was like, this is a lot of work to get going, to get started. And we just needed to get started. So like the self-hosting and self-listing on the services, you would have to either manually do it every time you had a new one or spend a bunch of time writing your own scripts to access their API. And Apple, Google, Stitcher, each had it slightly different. So you'd have to write a different API script for each service you wanted to automatically upload to.
So while there are a lot of these, we read a bunch of reviews and we looked for ones that were simple. And we landed on a site called Buzzsprout, which we also pay for. And I think for our current, we're paying like $16 a month.
Yeah, at the
transparency.
At the end of this, we'll give everyone roughly our operating costs.
Yep. Buzzsprout for us is about $16 a month. The smaller plan is $12 a month for 3 hours. It's $16 a month for 6 hours of content. The thing about it, and I just realized something as I was clicking through this, there's like 5 more directories that they added recently that we need to get listed on because we're not listed right now. Essentially, though, you set up your site. It gives you the RSS feed for your podcast. It hosts them forever for you. It grabs all your descriptions and stuff. And then you go to this little tab that says directories, and you just click Apple Podcast, get listed, and then you follow the steps. Spotify, get listed, follow the steps. Google Podcast, get listed, follow the steps. And literally, you just go through this thing, and it'll be like create. So like Pandora, they added. Sign in or create a Pandora account. Copy in your RSS feed. Enter your podcast information. Wait for Pandora. And then once you have a Pandora website address URL, give it here, and then it'll put you in as listed.
Nice. Yeah, I see
super
that.
convenient.
Nice.
Yeah, right?
I just saw that they add, those are some good ones too. It's nice seeing Podcast Addict, Deezer, and Pandora here.
Yep. So one of the reasons why we picked them is because they list on almost all of the major providers, and they're adding new ones. One of the other reasons why we picked it is for statistics. Statistics in podcasts are kind of weird because they're often based on downloads. There's no guarantee it's a listen because you can download the direct file. That said, we get an idea of what potential listenership looks like, what episodes work, what episodes don't work, engagement, things of that nature. And having kind of that ability to look at trends over the last 7 or 30 days, to look at individual episode downloads, to look at what applications and devices, not that I think we've ever used that, or to look at where people listen. Like, it's a cool thing, and it's a cool ability to be built into a platform to just understand what your audience potentially looks like and understand what they're interested in. Super cool kind of thing that comes with a lot of these podcast hosting providers, as opposed to if you're hosting it yourself, like you're going to probably have to code all that analytics engine stuff yourself. Instead of just utilizing the analytics engines that you get. So another cool feature that exists within that.
Yeah, and as for a statistics nerd like me, it's nice seeing that without having to do a bunch of work. And for us, a lot of what it came down to wasn't just being lazy, but it was, what can we do with relatively little upfront work to get us going. And while through this first year, we figure out what we want it to look like in the future. So,
for me, it was totally being lazy.
Yes,
because I want to provide content and I want to talk and like teach people stuff. I don't want to worry about all this other crap.
Yeah.
I just don't. Like, I don't have desire to spend time mixing and mastering. I don't have desire to worry about uploading to a whole bunch of different providers all the time. I don't have any desire to do all the administrative functions stuff that we can pay someone else to do for us because I'm lazy and I like this part of the podcast, not all the other stuff.
And what it came down to for me was a phrase that I heard from one of Bernie Brown's books that I listened to, and it was perfect is the enemy of done. So getting that whole everything needed to be perfect, done, and set up to be the best thing before we even start, getting that out of the way and just starting.
Yep. And then lastly kind of comes like having a Twitter, or for us, so like we'll talk about the website a little bit. So we use Squarespace. We just rebuilt in Squarespace because it's a pretty automated website builder. It hosts the blog. We can keep the blog there. We can have links to other stuff. We can add a couple jokes. It's not perfect. Like any automated website builder, it's got its flaws, but it's actually not that bad.
And we started with the full G Suite.
Which was way worse.
Yeah, way worse. But that's what we do our email through for the actual detections domain. So we just started with that. Again, that was just to get something going while we figured it out. And then once we got to a point where we're like, okay, we need to do something different with the website. And that's when we moved to Squarespace.
So if you cut that down, let's see. What's the G Suite, like $10?
It's $6 for one user.
All right. So if you cut that down into a general overall operating cost, we're roughly between $50 and $60 a month in operating cost. And that's because we're choosing to use a lot of services to meet our specific needs. So like if you're doing a local podcast, you have no reason to pay for Cast, because it's not necessary because you're doing it sitting in the same room as somebody or by yourself. If you want to host it yourself and put in that work, or you want to mix it down yourself, you don't need to pay for these other services. We choose to pay for these services because we don't want to.
And even though they're like that, even though we do pay for more than probably some other people who get started podcasting, like $50 a month really isn't that much money considering all of the work that these services are doing for us.
Agreed.
The amount of time that's being saved.
It's also realistically a really good time to shout out our Patreon supporters.
Yes.
Who on Patreon, and what we said kind of when we started that we wanted out of Patreon was to break even, roughly. So on Patreon, we make $68 a month, and it costs us about $60 to run it. And then like we had swag orders where we ordered like a bunch of patches and stickers and stuff. So like the swag orders came out of our own pocket because we wanted swag, probably because I wanted to put stickers and patches on stuff myself.
We got swag because we wanted swag, and then we just shared the leftover with other people around us.
I mean, you pretty much have to bulk order stuff like that. So, but ultimately, like through Patreon, and huge thank you to all the Patreon people, we make enough to cover our operating expenses. That's all I ever really cared about. We cover our operating expenses. That works. And we get to have fun every week and give, this cool way of sharing information, usually InfoSec, sometimes how to start a podcast.
And I mean, yeah, we do have fun, which is a fantastic thing. But the other part for me is hearing more and more people about how they like it, how they found informative information, and even how it's helped them to learn something new. That for me, hearing people getting something positive out of it is the whole reason I wanted to do it.
Oh, 100%. But I'm not doing anything unless I have fun too.
You gotta have fun in life.
And then it's probably also worth mentioning that we went to Fiverr for logo design, and I want to say that was like $50, maybe, right?
It ended up being 75 with the tip, but the guy just fucking nailed it.
Yeah, he did a really good job. Several friends from Dead Pixel actually went to the same guy to get personal logo designs.
They have all come out well.
Yeah, they have. He does really cool work, but so we paid $75 for logo design because my initial Photoshop attempt was pretty bad.
But it got us started.
Exactly. Like we did enough to get us started. So the moral of the story is, if you look at us when we first started, we had bad background noise. We weren't doing post-processing. Our logo looked like crap. Our website looked even worse than our logo. So like, if you really cut down to but the fact of the matter is we got something out there for people.
Yep.
Which means you can get something out there for people too, and you can improve on it as you go, because that's what we're always going to do. Like, we're always going to be like, oh, hey, this thing's cool. I actually have a Stream Deck, and at some point, like, I have a way to integrate a soundboard in, and at some point I'm going to actually set that up, and we can play around with this concept of like inline integrating a soundboard and sound effects into the podcast.
That'll be fun.
Which could be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So like, we're always playing with new concepts to get better, but we didn't wait to have those figured out to start. So that's the moral of the story. Like, you're home, you have time.
Do it.
Do something.
Just do it.
And honestly, do it simpler. Just start a Twitch stream. Like, that's dead simple. Podcasts are way more complicated than Twitch streams. Why don't we start a Twitch stream?
Because then we would definitely show people how we don't make Blue Team sexy.
That's very true.
At least if it's just our voices, we can do some stuff to make it sound like Barry White to help up the sexy level. But once people see us, it's all, the game's off.
That's the other reason why I got this mic, because I can adjust the bass and things in my voice. So trust me, I don't even sound in real life like I make Blue Team sexy. Only in this microphone, which I'm okay with. All right, should we move on to the detection?
The detection, yes. And I wanted to bring up something. Now, if this is a duplicate, I'm sorry, because I've talked about this a number of times over the past few months in many different conversations. But
we're eventually going to have duplicates because, to be honest, neither of us can remember 22 episodes back and what detections we had.
And we don't pre-plan the detections out any more than like maybe 2 days ahead of time. So
if not like, oh shit, we're recording tonight.
Yeah, what are we going to do?
We're in the pre-show chat. Oh, what should we do for a detection? We should think up something.
But related to VPNs, since everyone's working from home, something that I did that I found fun was looking at concurrent connections and specifically using a mathematical function called Haversine. And what this does is it takes distance and time. It's what gives us our kilometers or miles per hour reading, how far you've traveled over a specific set of time. So if you do the same thing with two concurrent VPN connections, using a GeoIP lookup on those IP addresses and relating to the times, you can get a speed, a relative speed of how long it would take for someone to drive, fly, walk, whatever, to make those two connections. So that's a way that you can look for people that might have compromised accounts, or someone who's attempting to potentially brute force or compromise multiple accounts. Is if you start seeing ridiculous speeds, like someone who lives in, say, Virginia, and then there's another login, say, from Oregon, so they'd have to travel, like 800 miles an hour by plane in order to do it?
One warning that I will provide everyone on this one. And this is something that I learned, and I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here because it's funny. I was doing an IR gig where we had some compromised accounts, very much like this, right? Largely, we were looking at like OWA and ridiculous logins because that's actually a rule in Outlook, web access. So we're looking at these ridiculous login events, and the same is true of VPN, just so everybody knows. Like this applies globally across these things. And I go in, we're thinking like one or two accounts, like let's work through this. And then like the guy calls me, he goes, "Oh my God, like I just looked at the login stuff. It's like 200 people." I'm like, holy shit. Well, that fucking sucks. So let's dig into this a little bit. And like, we're freaking out, right? Me too. Like, I'm like, okay, like, damn, 200 compromised accounts. Like, that's serious. We're going to have to do like a network-wide password reset, all this stuff. I learned something though, as I started to dig into this. Mobile phones do not have a local IP address based on your area. Mm-hmm. They have an IP address based on oftentimes where the company is headquartered or like anywhere that the company sticks you.
Sometimes you're lucky with the the tower that it's connected to.
Sometimes. But like we were looking at like people who lived in, California as an example, had phone logins to OWA from New Jersey. And we're like, well, that's bad. But really, like Verizon, like they were just getting a Verizon IP from New Jersey.
Yes.
Or a Sprint IP from New Jersey or whatever. So like very important to know, like phones are often the exception of the ridiculous login thing these days, especially because they kind of maintain persistent login.
Mm-hmm.
So that exists. But I will tell you, like through my like 5 hours of freaking out, like learn from me, people, learn from me.
And that just goes back to what we've mentioned a bunch of times before, continuing to provide context. Even though this detection will get you started, it is not the end-all be-all of declaring an active incident or not. It's just an initial detection for you to look into.
You know, one of the really funny things I've learned about VPNs through my career, one of the most difficult things to do with VPN, determine whether or not it's an asset that you own. You wouldn't think so, right? Like you would think like almost every VPN provider would be able to be like, hey, let me check that asset. Hey, that matches some database somewhere, blah, blah, blah. Like you can do some certificate-based VPN stuff, but certificates can be stolen pretty quickly. It's actually really difficult to know if it's an asset, because one really easy way to do this is just say, hey, it's a VPN connection from an unknown asset. Like that's a pretty clear indicator that something bad is happening. But actually figuring out that it's an unknown asset is a lot more challenging than what most people would probably think. Again, if anybody has a good solution to that, hit me up, because I still haven't mastered that concept yet. But with that said, like there's a whole bunch of VPN-y kind of stuff that you can do. I know we talked about one before, but like VPNs from common web services, AWS, Azure, things like that. They're publicly available net blocks. You can grab them. A lot of what the OffSec tools kind of use, you can spin up an AWS to do password spraying and stuff across like VPN. So like you can look for things like that. You can tie VPN into threat intelligence and look for weird things there. You can look for common proxy services. A lot of cool VPN stuff that you can do, especially right now while everybody's VPNing.
Yeah, and now's the time to learn. If you didn't have exposure to it before, dig the fuck in now and get it while you can.
Right? Well, then I do believe that wraps us up.
That does wrap us up, unless Animal Crossing has decided to put forth any sort of like blue team stuff while we were recording.
No, I did post a really cute picture of me hanging out with all my villagers, though. Happy and having a party and watching TV and playing arcade and board gaming.
Yes, check his Twitter for that. So, on that note, I think we can call it.
We can. I'm taking us out.
Have fun.
So, everybody, watch Doctor Who, play Animal Crossing, and go forth and find badness.